Hi everyone, my name is Isabel and I'm here at the Port Royal location of Galerie de Bellefeuille. With us today we have Barbara Cole, award-winning Canadian photographer whose artistic practice spans over a number of decades. Barbara, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Isabel.
Before we dive deeper into the new publication, Between Worlds, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your practice.
Sure.
How did your early experiences with photography sculpt your practice?
You know, I started at the newspaper and doing fashion, and I was always playing around with it. I have no experience, right? So it's just kind of taking an idea and with your knowledge, making it work out the best as you can. And so when I went freelance, and that was 10 years after the newspaper, I knew that I had a desire to do something very artistic, but I didn't know what that was. I always was influenced by backgrounds, and my first show at Jane Corkin Gallery was women in situations, and I sussed out these incredible backgrounds in Toronto that just called out to me and said something. And I always shot full length. The figure was always full length in this background. And I remember another photographer saying to me, you know, why don't you ever crop in? And I couldn't, I don't know. So I had these backgrounds in mind, and I had these full figures in mind, and I had a desire, a real heartfelt desire to make art. No training whatsoever, but I just felt it was my voice. And so I began that way, and each show kind of built on the other. You know, I learned new skill sets, and I learned to, I experimented with film and technique. I think that one of the main things about the way that I practice my art is that I always feel it has to have a physicality. So it's not enough to just shoot the picture, but I had to embellish it. You know, in the first series, I put earrings on and lace and feathers and whatever worked in the picture. You know, if she was wearing a long gown, I'd put silver strip of fabric down the side of her body. And that wasn't looked on very well, because back in that was in the 80s, early 80s. A large photograph was 16 by 20, you know, and to do that, to adulterate a picture was very pejorative. Like, nobody wanted you to touch that. It had to be just, you know, film and paper and a print. But that's sort of the trajectory of my work, is that I've always taken things that didn't match and put them together just to see, you know, in terms of texture and color and backgrounds and the subjects, and just play around with it. It just gives me great joy. It also, I think, without knowing it subconsciously, I always talked, you know, I suffer from depression, and I think I just felt that this was a wonderful way of expressing joy, and it got me out of myself. I actually, you know, I would get migraines as well, and I never knew I had a headache when I was shooting, and then the shoot would end, and I'd go, oh my God, where did that come from? Again, you know, like, yeah. But it just absorbed every part of me, and it saved my life. Like, being an artist saved my life. I never knew that was possible. I never knew to be an artist was something you could do as a career. I just kind of felt my way through it, and being able to create things has, you know, it restores me. If I'm having a low time, I know I need to shoot more. I know I need to plan a shoot. I don't even know what I'm shooting sometimes, but I need to create. So
that's so wonderful.
Yeah.
That art is, your practice is such a safe haven for you, for your physical and mental health.
Exactly.
Were you able to combine your practice, your sort of work, with your other safe haven of the swimming pool?
Oh.
How did that come to be?
Well, that's, you know, I always have a different answer to that. There are many reasons why I got underwater. One was practicality. I'd been shooting Polaroid film for 10 years. I loved the creaminess of it. It didn't have a great tonal range, so it looked more painterly, and I always loved the feeling of, I never wanted to do a straight picture. It always had to look like a painting somehow. And so part of it was Polaroid went out of business, and I was searching for a way to recreate that non-photographic edge to my work. And at the same time, we put a pool in our backyard. And I had experimented with shooting underwater in the 70s at the Toronto Sun. Mm-hmm. I used a friend's pool. It worked out well, but it's too messy. It's really an inconvenience. You can't borrow a pool twice. Let's put it that way. It seems like it's okay the first time. And so we had a pool. And I just and I'd also, the other answer is I had been suffering from migraines, and one of the treatments was swimming. So I don't know whether it worked or not, but I really wanted to get rid of the migraine, so I did exactly what they said. I swam every single day, Monday through Friday. And after a certain point, I got hooked, and I've been swimming for like 40 years now. So I had taken in things subconsciously. You know, the place I swam was the top floor of a big building, Manulife Tower, and they had skylights. So the light filtered through on me while I was swimming, and I saw the patterns on the pool floor. You know, I was swimming, I looked over at people beside me and said, that's interesting, you know. And so all of that was kind of going through my mind. And so that's the other reason I thought maybe I could do something painterly underwater. And from the very first roll of film, it just took my breath away. I never thought I'd stick with it. I actually called Nikon and asked to borrow a set of underwater cameras and a flash. They gave me a couple of tips. And that first roll of film was so magical. I couldn't believe how I'd done this, because usually when you start a show, you have an idea and you just kind of get there and change it a little bit. You know, you're not quite sure how it works, and you're usually at the end, the show you create is quite dissimilar to the one that you imagined. And this one worked from the first roll of film, from the first frame. It was like amazing. And then I thought that underwater photography would be great, because in winter, the show's over in September, right? Because I always have trouble finishing my work. And by the time I was finished in September, I had an idea for the next show. And I started, you know, imagining the costumes and working out the technical stuff in the winter. And then I would start in April doing tests. And so it went on like that now for 25 years. So it wasn't a quick solution, right? But it's been evolving, so it's all good.
That's amazing. Can you give us a little bit of insight into the work that goes into preparing a shoot? What happens before you get into the pool? How do you sketch out your compositions beforehand? Is it more of a stream of consciousness sort of creation?
Yeah, wow, I give it a lot of time. There is so much that goes into a show. Well, first of all, the costumes. It's all about the costumes for me, and the hair. It's all about the hair and the costumes.
And hair underwater is no easy feat.
Hair underwater, I mean, I've done everything. So I've done wigs, I've done real hair, I've done braids, but I mean, I just need hair for some reason. It just needs to flow. Costumes are very important. They set the mood. Now, underwater, you can't buy these costumes because store-bought clothes don't work the same way that I need them to work underwater. Plus, I have to buy them anyways, right? Because you can't take a dress from the store, ruin it, and then give it back. Yeah. So I've always worked with designers, fabulous people who love the challenge also of working with an artist and making it work, the challenge of making their creations work underwater. So we work really closely together, choosing the fabric. I give them photo reference of what I'm thinking of. I remember in Duplicity, my photo reference was Lillian Bassman, I think. She had some incredible shots of these striped dresses, and so we went that way, black and white, very simple. We use extremely cheap fabrics because they don't change color in chlorine, right? I did something for the Royal Ontario Museum, and I got a gown in white made as a mermaid flying, swimming down to the bottom of a pool to pick up the pearl. And so we got this beautiful white gown made, and throughout the day, I'm looking at the gown, and it's, by the end of the day, it's like tobacco yellow. It's like, and the art director came up to me and he said, "Was this gown that color to begin with?" And I'm going, "Maybe, I don't know." But don't worry. And I'm going, "I'm worried." How do you change this? But yeah, so it has to have a certain flow. It has to have a certain cut. It has to have a certain quality. And then in color, you know, I conceive the show ahead of time. And it's, you know, it all has to work together. So if I put a background in, then I use paint samples to color coordinate my gowns. In somewhere, the latest show, there were 3 models. And I had been shooting long enough that I knew what the dresses need to be to coordinate and not interfere with each other. I love those colors. I picked them and had them done by 2 designers. One was a guy in New York who did some beautiful, gorgeous bias cut gowns, but he was quite slow, and I started worrying that you can't rush a designer, right? They're artists, but I'm shooting on Monday, you know.
You have a deadline.
So he told me that he would, for sure he would make them, and they get there, and they got there the morning of the shoot.
Oh, wow.
But I also, about a week before, started working with a person in Toronto who does work for the National Ballet, and we used the same colors and did slightly different variation. And I'm so glad I did, because they were subtle variations, but they made each group of pictures look fresh. So I had a lot to drive me to get new and different nuances. So I do that. Sometimes I draw out, like the current show I'm working on, I'm drawing out a storyboard, and we just, because it's not digital, nobody can see what's in my head, I felt it was necessary for them to have a frame. This is the pose, this is kind of the clothes. And then I hire a stylist. Above water, we can borrow, which is such a nice thing for me. And then the model looks at that, they get it, and then they use their talent, you know, which is considerable. You know, they're so great, and they collaborate with me on it, and they go, "I like this, but what about, you know, different things?" And I'm going, "Okay, I didn't draw that, but it looks pretty good." So there's the storyboarding, and then I test a lot. I've been working with the same assistant now, Mark, for 25 years, which is amazing. Never thought it would last more than a season. And so he speaks Barb. He knows when I ask him for this, I mean that. You know, this is just, yeah, he definitely gets it. And he is so positive and so encouraging. And I start talking about what my idea is about 6 months ahead of time, so he can get through all the no's. Like, this is not going to work. Are you sure you want to do this? I don't know whether we can get this kind of thing underwater. I don't. And then finally, 6 months later, we're ready to shoot, and he's there. Here's our background, here's our light, here's our softbox, here's our whatever, and we've got it, you know?
Everything's ready to go.
Yeah, so there's all that technical stuff to get through, and we test a lot before the shoot. Everybody wants to do it. I mean, all the brave models want the challenge and they want the fun.
It's such an interesting project to be a part of course.
And they all say they can swim, and they all say they can sink, right? And I know that not to be the case. So we do a casting, and underwater casting with boards and stuff, my name is, because you know, they look so different above water. I only recognize them underwater. And we see if they can do that. You know, like, I need to know, because on the day they'll be nervous anyways, and they'll come and they'll float up to the top a million times. But by the end of the time, we're friends. We're underwater, there's a connection, you know. Nobody else is around us, it's just us. And, you know, when I come up, Mark will be on top of the water saying, what he thinks, and I will say what I think, but it's a very small group. You know, there isn't a lot of us, and we become very tightly knit. I also respect the models. They're they're just amazing. They do stuff underwater that, like, I would never do. Sometimes afterwards, the next morning, I go, "Okay, I'm going to try this now." And I go, "Oh, that's really hard. I wish," and they don't want to, I mean, I'm much older than them, so they don't want to say, and they're models, they want to please me. But I always say to them, like, listen, I've been doing this all summer. I can hold my breath a long time. Come up when you need to. Don't, be a hero here, And that helps. And then eventually they just have fun, because that's why they're in the business. They just want to do a great job.
And it sounds like such a special, close-knit, collaborative process with your models, your designers, your assistants, your technicians. I understand why they'd want to be a part of it.
Well, I love my team. I respect my team. Like, this is something I could not do alone. To the degree that I produce it to such a level that I could never do it on my own. So I need them.
And it shows in the finished product, really. It shows a lot of love and collaboration from all parties. As someone with a command of the historic photographic process and with your ability to adapt across various media, is this something that inspired the digital component of the new book?
Oh, interesting. No, the book, that happened. This is the first book that they did that with.
Really?
Yeah, and they asked me what I had, and I always do little videos about my shows because nobody gets it. They think I'm sitting in a tank, or they think I'm shooting outside a box of water. They don't get the simplicity. You get in the water, you shoot with an underwater camera, and basically that's it. But so I explained, even the wet collodion work that I'm doing now, I did a whole video on that because I remember going to galleries and the people at the gallery would tell me, oh, this is a cyanotype, or this is a whatever, using a term, photographic term. And it meant nothing to me. And I thought, I'm so stupid. I like this picture, but I have no appreciation for it because I haven't got a clue what they're talking about. And do they even? They're just using the terminology.
And the technical lingo is so extensive too.
Yeah. So I used these videos that I did just to explain things. And then when I was doing the book, they said, what do you have? And I said, oh, I have videos, background videos on every show. And they said, it's really great. It's really interesting because we're thinking of doing QR codes. And voila, we have this book, and because the book isn't done chronologically, which is brilliant, there are pieces of shows that go together in the book, but where's the rest of that series? Mm-hmm. So there's a QR code, and you scan with your phone, the QR code, and it opens up a whole new area where you can see me talking about explaining that type of genre and how I'm doing it and what it is. You see behind the scenes footage. So it's no longer a mystery. I mean, I like the mystery behind photographs. My whole Painted Ladies Irish print show didn't sell because I'd gone to a gallery that did painting. I was like one of the 2 photographers there, and people couldn't believe it was a photograph. And so the guy had to explain constantly, yes, it is a photograph, and yes, she uses this film, and then she does this and this and this. And it ruined the magic, right? So I was on the fence about explaining, but then I thought, I really want these pictures to be understood. So I did videos now. Every series is basically represented by a video. And the appearances, the flower work, is actually a video from the installation at Galerie de Bellefeuille.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, it's such a fabulous addition to the book.
It just adds a whole other level. So you understand what more was in that show, instead of just seeing a piece of this and a piece of that.
Oh, the finished results look beautiful in print, but of course getting that behind the scenes look and hearing you speak on your pieces is such an amazing feature.
And the editor who, we did the book, it took about 2 years. I had to scan everything I'd ever done, which was kind of strange. It's kind of like, this is your life.
Yeah, you're going through all your work.
I had to go through everything and scan them as little JPEGs. And then again, when they were chosen, retouch them as large pieces. So it was like forever going back in the past. But her name's Josephine, she laid it out on her studio floor, 200 analog pages, line by line by line. This is your book. And then she photographed it. And then she photographed each page. And then the page would be this picture and text goes here. And I was just so amazed at what she'd done, because the other 2 books were all chronological, so it gets boring, like there's another picture of the series 1 and another. Here she put something, it was a huge puzzle. She took something from 1994 and something from 2013, and she saw she saw the commonality between them.
There is a through line through all of your series. Even before you started shooting underwater in 2002, some of your earlier work, we still see that that signature Barb trait throughout.
Yeah, there's a Barb trait, but I didn't know I was doing anything. I was just going from my gut, and I think that's what you have to do. I mean, I just hired somebody in my studio recently, and we were talking about the scene today as a photographer, and she said, you know, I said to her, why are you applying for this job? You're so good. You know, and she said, it's really hard out there. So we talked about that. And she was saying that, how do you make it? You know, how do you get there? And I said, you know, just make it your own. Like, just find your voice. Don't copy anything. Because what is that? You know, you're not doing it. You're watching somebody else do it and then doing a carbon copy. But if you go from your gut and your instinct, although it's very scary, afterwards, like I'm looking at this show here and I'm going, this is 25 years of work. And I realize how much I loved them, you know, but while you're doing it, nothing's good enough. But you have to take that chance and be brave and continue on, and that's all you've got is your gut, right? So that's what I do.
Barbara, thank you so, so much for joining us. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. We invite you all to come join us here at the Port Royal location at 1455 Sherbrooke Street West until October 24th to see the show in person.